Shalom. We shall now start the teaching with the prayer of taking refuge in generation of bodhicitta.
To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Yeah. Saying that you're missing one line from the prayer, but let's go with that. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. But the accumulations I gather through listening to the teachings may become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. But the accumulations I gather through listening to the teachings may become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. But the accumulations I gather through listening to the teachings may become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings.
In Gochu Sham Digdwe.
Laola.
Gochu Sham Diviva.
Lalong. Rinpoche Gochu na dix.
Kangi Tuze Yosun, Tawatam Japamic, Tambechen, the Kodam Chatselo. Tangan Jushiti and a Soso Tabendo Kosu, Sung Shabegi, Dipachia Michashi, Gavapusu Soberche, Rangasem the Yonsu, the dinner Sanjetambai, Sheveki, Sholuka Chiki, Tandeshe, Kazan do or Tandai Mutun Doache. To Servas, that tell us Kazan Chozati, Manzu Drubjati, Mondotan, Nili Nires, Tinde Indu, Tamungondo Duatela, and Shung Sholoka Tigi, and Sik Kangiting Yorchana, Dipachia Michashi, Sayating Yores, or that Tigi, Karesna, Dipachia Michashi Sayatigi, Monto Duaki, and G. Manglang Jundoti, Tomer Lende Landola Sushin Labia, or T. that Dipachia Michashins. And Lende Landola Love Sayati, Lende Sayati, Kandichi Resna, go Nambachiwoki Kechamare, Lende Kolia Kechashini, Muti Chibuaya Yore, Chirobaya Yore, Muti Chibua, or Tindechi. And Transon Hamebai, Tanjan Hamebai Ujire, or Tuscheni, Lende Kamesuni Yore. Oh, that Lende said, Kandijiresna, Kulungi Cabarchitan Dreve, and Chawasambuchila Legewa. Kulungi Cabatan Dreve, Kulung Bachitan, that Cabatan Dreve, Chawa Nyambachilaya, and Dibele, Miguele, or Tuscheni, Gemigi. Gevele da Megevele said, Tindichilia, Tanya Jarje, Chiloki, Chi, Lungagi, Namjurchigo Kechamai, so Kulun to you the Bachi. Or that Tindechi, Kuno Sambuchi than David Chavati, Montu Duaki, never Tigiova. Kulung Yambachi than David Tone, Chavati, and Jibudungengia, Nindred Gia, or Tindeki, and that. Cherechik to Bugiva, or Tustilla and the Lende Sati, that will do some shun the nature red was. The Dibachi, which I said that road was.
So the subject matter for the teachings today is the verse from the Moksha Sutra. And the verse is, do not commit any negative actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. So, as I mentioned yesterday, there are two objectives for us Buddhists. One is the temporal goal of high status or high rebirth, and the ultimate goal of definite emergence. So, the first line of the verse, do not commit any negative action, shows the goal of high status and the method for achieving this high status. How is
בהגשמה של לידה טובה בחיים הבאים, במצב לידה טוב או עליון. השורה הראשונה אומרת, הימנעו מכל פעולה שלילית. אז איך השורה, אם נשאל את עצמנו, איך השורה הזאת קשורה בהגשמה של לידה במחוז קיום עליון, במחוז קיום טוב? אז בעצם כשהשורה הזאת אומרת, הימנעו מכל פעולה שלילית.
Yes. How is this so? Because the main cause of achieving a high status is living our lives according to karma and its effect. So when we talk about karma, this is not a topic that is solely, this is not something that is only within the purview of Buddhism. There are other non-Buddhist Indian traditions that talk about karma too. So what exactly is karma? So karma refers to actions that are conjoined or connected with a particular motivation. So actions that are done motivated by a good motivation or virtuous motivation is a virtuous karma, is virtue. Any action that is done motivated by non-virtuous or bad motivation would be a non-virtuous or negative karma. And when we talk about action, we are not just talking about the physical or verbal actions, but mainly we have to think of the karma or action in terms of the motivation behind those actions. So in short, if an action is done with a virtuous or good motivation, the result will be happiness. You will obtain a high status. If the motivation behind the action is non-virtuous, is bad, then the result of the action will be suffering, and one will be born in the bad migration.
ההיבט החיצוני של פעולה פיזית או פעולה מילולית, אלא הדבר העיקרי שקובע את סוג הפעולה היא המוטיבציה שמניעה את הפעולה הזאת. זה אומר שכשאנחנו מסתכלים על הפעולות האלה, פעולות של חסד או פעולות שליליות, פעולות חסד מביאות לאושר ורווחה אישית. פעולות שליליות מביאות לסבל. זה באופן מקוצר, באופן מאוד תמציתי, הנושא של הקרמה. לסולה.
תנדגי ג'י, גידיק בנלנג נמשעתי, לנדג למדולה, סושידו לבגויה תיאן, תאווה תינג'ון לתות דבה. תינג'ון תלה, junde tenjung khasan shuba na shi and then ta be tenjung mingyang ta yo zang tenjung se nane and tandati junde tenjung se chidan de ten ta be tenjung lai thu re mingyang ta yo zang tenjung lai thu de re de zo zo nge ba thang ya ti and junde tenjung la nge ba thang be go ne lende le ya iche lhagwar tu kya ya ji da nang be cheba ji gi ji ngaran su 상랑 퇴배 냠내치야 지 기름산으로 조름산으로 아니 지 족천산으로 차제천부산으로 다 된데 뭔고요래 지 하장기 지 산지 공부할 뉴르드 투야기 지 맹아 삽사모 뭔고요래 요래데 된데를 냠내 접업 어떻게 방법 통곡이 지 라렌당 지 무스 정달체야기 디데 아니 저 라렌기고 렌덴 수고이스 ko reare khandar sikthombo khande chi phejotang gi yeba inaya ngos lalen ka indu kenza thambone cheche ya rogore ma to chi gi kenza thambone ni ba ma za ba kenza ngaba thu le shingi ma ba o tu sindu che lalen gi go and ngon tu du ya gi zambe and lende gi lang to la chu shindu labya ti ke chang res dine indu dande shungsi ti na la ya tsaka thambone ti na la and the Bajiam Chashing said, 용대 대야 대인바래 근데 인도 말한 속에다 나중에 냠래 저거 수다 수 있나야 지 수수이 규리야 지 사단 남지 도베인데 유래 깨차리 연애래 깨 매내래 가리 있나야 자와 애니 시대 아니 랜델 라고야 랜델 랑돌 주신도 라고야 디야 애니 산제 라니기 아니 다니 다근 거인지 달라 수신 건데 주스네 첨날 인지를 배제 다 두스체니 라니기 건든 소견 치는데 라니기 적어야지 레스 다 tindeji rani ki ngondun chogyo rani ngondu kompa thoya salam ki toba nyutu dre thoya teleya ene tanjurgi anga mathuya o tindeji yoya la ene lendele ya sushi malaba yongtab zawa ni ne mede ba chi o tinde indu toba sange jumde ne korankiya ene rangi nyamle ki thode ene ji ya salam ki toba ya dus chi rogo res tinde게 랑이 냠네 지수비 네데 엥에 캐나소리야 띵그레스 디레 마도 지기 아니 디바치 주세안도 아니 지 도바상게 좀 된데 투줄이에베 방도 위엔데 고셔 잡진 만한절마 나요야기 녜베스지만 나요야서 tinde지 요마레스 tum남디과 취임을 주신 레베 동에 차드메셀라 니기 또바 셴라 뽑는데 다 취인이 되버든 트로이스 오다 최는 내루 양답에 대 친질로도 좀 단단한 거 란체버 좀 받아 나도 좀 듣죠 아니 친질로 힘받이 못해베 토네 아니 지 진진이 기견다 연대 방배 연대 어떻게 참 못해베 토네 엔 로고 그래스 저 도스미입니다.
So the practice of abandoning non-virtue and cultivating virtue in accordance with presentation of karma and its effects ultimately is rooted or due to the Buddhist philosophical view of dependent origination. As I mentioned yesterday, there are 3 levels of dependent origination. There is dependent origination in terms of causality that causes gives rise to effect. Then there's dependency in terms of phenomena being designated. And then you have the most subtle level of meaning of dependent origination in terms of how everything that exists as merely imputed by thought existing in a mere name. So although the practice of abandoning non-virtue and cultivating virtue ultimately is rooted in subtlest level of meaning of dependent origination, but explicitly it is related to the level of dependent origination in terms of causality. So there are many profound practices in Buddhism. And there are many of such profound instructions that are said to be able to confer on us realizations in a very quick time. Instructions on the generation stage and completion stage of higher Suga Tantra. You have the practice of the great perfection, Zobachimbo, the practice of Mahamudra, and so forth. But whatever the case, the foundation of all Buddhist practices, including these very profound practices, the very foundation here is living our lives according to karma and effect. So it is said that the first Dharma practice is living our lives according to the principle of cause and effect. This is the very door of the Dharma practice. So, just like when we are climbing the stairs, we have to place our foot on the lower steps before we can ascend the staircase. So likewise, the first Dharma practice is abandoning non-virtue and cultivating virtue in accordance with the presentation of karma and its effect. So this very practice is the basis of the entire practice of the entire Buddha Dharma. It's the foundation of all other practices here. So on the basis of living our lives according to the principle of cause and effect, karma and its effect, then we are ensured of getting a successive human life of freedoms and endowments in the future. And our practice of karma and its effects will then enable us to gradually achieve the various realizations of the paths and grounds. So the Buddha himself, he did the practice and he achieved the path, and he has taught us based on his experience. So what's left to do is for us to take heed of the teachings and implement them in our daily lives. So as the Buddha said, the subduer do not wash away our negativities with water. They cannot remove our suffering with their hands. Neither can they transfer their realizations upon us. They can liberate us through teaching the truth of suchness. So from this verse, you can see that the Buddha will not be able to wash away our sins, our negativities. They will not be able to take away all of our problems and suffering, and they will not be able, and they are not able to transfer or grant us the realizations. We have to implement the teachings that he gave, isn't it? And in particular, the Buddhas liberate sentient beings by teaching the truth of suchness. So we need to be acquainted with, the faults of self-grasping, which is the root of all our problems. We need to be acquainted with the faults of self-grasping and self-cherishing, and so forth.
יכולות לסתור ולהסיר את מצבי התודעה האחרים האלה. ככה הבודה עובד עבורנו, או ככה הבודה הוא עוזר לנו, ככה אנחנו מפיקים תועלת משוריו של הבודה, הוא מראה לנו מהי האחיזה בעצמי, מהי הוקרת העצמי, וגם איך מפעילים להם תרופות נגד. לעשות.
Dan lende sayatiri ko jachmu shuchi duwas. Jidan lende sayati yunde chirwas. Takol ye yunde kebarwachi. Kunlung kebardan rebe yu sangen chigle dribu dedu sayati. O tinde chigi ta tanya chigli tene lende sayati. Takol ya kunlung kebardan rebe yu sangbo inare, yungya ba inare telaya di dribu de tsedilamiya. Kyawa chimalamiya. 야 겨와 치마 내 치매 근지체제 쳇딜 미야들 통조 용주글래 겨와 치마 대가랑이야 미야들이야 깨내 용주글래 어디 디부디 겨와 신다 주네 겨와 수바시바 주네 겨와 동작 제일 있네야 에네 지다 미요야 지기 어 도스지 군고 켜봤는데 유들라 에네 랜단실은 용주글래 제제 알레당고 랜데사 레사 유지 군고 켜봤는데 자와 찍디 찍바래디 그 지구 용단텔라 에는 그 타니를 남이 나서야 돼 봐. 아니 대전도 마세베 무수 진남인기 지구 tinde치 다 용야지기 베디 다 주시 조 진행지라 아니 편집을 했어. 다디 and Young's Zoba, Chasa Pumbuti, Trutuyagi, Betty, Gan Shuk Charging, Zoming Kalia, and then Drujegles such. Penjigles, Drujegles, Tendua, and then Tezam the Masebe, Kazan Kamis Suits Chumbare, then Jimbatawan and Lonjo Yungures, Sutun Sumbala Tene, and Dunamic Ludi Yungures, and Service Danda Dema, the Sebe Sundu Sijita Dema, Yungures Sati, Pena Sutum Suyati, and G. Montuduaki, Muntu Luluaki, leg so penjig let's all chagi yoibre. Rete, Tichigo Kikajaremidoa, or Wombo Joachewa, or Negi Muntu Luigi, Tobe, Negolaya, Chakin Monguji Yade, you Minda, Monguji Duyoba, or Tuzolea, and Zojig less. Penjeta Zoche, what Tinde Yungutua, and Tinde Hindu, and Shung Chilende Shung Tinsunalia, Penjeta, Zoje Cabaret, Penje gave upon Zoje Migave Zoba, and Penje Migave upon Zoje gave Zobas, and Miluchi top the Yaba Inaya, Wambo Matawa, Joa member, Shara, Womba, what Tindegi, that Omomasama Tindisi yon deati. Zoche lady Yabuchimachumta. Ingu the Penjig lady, then some Miluch Pemerati. That Taganashi, Yanchi Mizan Jundan Tinde, the Wujabdagi, Chitashimi Soro, Jen, Yajagon Chedak. Or the call John Day in Bechane, Saya Tunada, Desata Tuzolia, Mone, Mipangochile, Chagaya Yodachi. What in the Yodavati? The Penjig to do Lugi. Payag, Leg, Togi, Tunduluji Pembe, Pangba Imbare, Tunduluji Imbare, Rede, or Chagan persons of Shuji, Yodavati, and Zoje Gavelic Zobas, what the nature led Delia, and Dande Shumataba, Chi Penjig led and Drujig leather, and Chi Delia, Genin you the land shelling use, and then Namdam would you was, what the Giti, Jin Nambe Chevatsugi, Cam Goyaji. Any Yakabri or Nima Kadu Shushan of his digumento. Or let the Satsavina until Joyun Taya made the searching, not in the Gombashina, Yungudua, Titin member in Bare. Kora let Tindiji, Namik into Sambu inare, Yamba inare, Tindeji, Duyak Ledge Sasha Yovina, called Juvan Draji. T. Yeveta the Kardusna, Maranso, Dubami gave Ledge any. Till Shabachiadua, or Shabachina Tayadua, or Kate Namiki Duty, Jiad led Satan, Taya Mevchida, Yodra Mevzina, the Wakazishana, and Gobat Dutumara, Taya Gobat Dutumara. What in the Hindu, and she, the Bamigave led subject Sasha Yovina, Shabacheni, or the Namiki do Jimmy Ronchene, Taya Yodachi. Taya Gavatop Chungishuti Cheva Yeva, Dean Jibu. Dendry dance and sober, that in the sonum chanting le, top changing, Sasha Yaba Inaya, Condre Wangi, and a tea, Jom dry Yadaba. Tin Joms do, Namig to Jirun chate, Tindegi top changing, Jin to Yati, that Jirun to Yaba nobody yam dry in and Jom draw said, Tirva, what today in do, which she less and Kanda Sasha, but there, and then Yodachi Yadaba. What in the Madras. That is go the care the kitchen person. Then do shiver.
So the presentation of karma and its effects is a huge topic. There's so much to talk about it. So in general, karma and its effects is an instance of the general the law of causality. But what makes karma special is that it involves an agent. It involves a motivation, like what I've said early on. If an action is done motivated by a virtuous motivation, then the action would be a virtuous action, and that would give rise to positive impact, which is happiness, good rebirth, and so forth. An action that is done motivated by non-virtuous motivation is non-virtue, is negative karma, and will give rise to unpleasant effects. It will give rise to suffering. So, and if we talk about karma in terms of the speed or the time in which its effects arise, then there is karma whose effects we are certain to experience in this life. There are karmas whose effect we will not experience in this life, but we will experience in the next life. But there are karmas whose effects we will experience in a life beyond the next, and so forth. Karma can give rise to effects even after a very long time. Yeah. So if we talk about karma in terms of the time of its ripening, this is how we go about it. Yeah. Then there is also a discussion of karma in terms of projecting karma and completing karma. So projecting karma or throwing karma is that which projects a new aggregate or new body and mind in cyclic existence in the future. But then there is also actualizing karma. Actualizing karma is the karma that is fully potentialized to the point whereby you will definitely experience the result. That means you are confirmed, you are on your way to acquiring this specific new set of aggregates, body and mind. So if you remember, yesterday I mentioned that ethical discipline is the practice of ethical discipline will result in a good basis or good rebirth, having the body of a human or God. And the practice of generosity will result in wealth, prosperity. The practice of patience and joyous perseverance will result in pleasant physical appearance. Yeah. So amongst these different types of karmas, ethical discipline which results in a good body, either a good basis, either having a body of a human or God, that is the main cause of high status. So if we approach this from the viewpoint of projecting and completing karma, then of the two, then ethical discipline is like the practice of ethical discipline like leads to the accumulation of this projecting or throwing karma, isn't it? But the other practices of generosity and patience and so forth do result in different effects, isn't it? Yes, we may obtain the body of a happy migratory being. We may be a human being, but there are other karmas that will be responsible for us having a complete sensory faculties that will result in us having a wealth or lack of wealth and so forth. So being rich or poor, being physically attractive or not, and so forth, these are results of different karmas. And these karmas are what we call completing karma. And you can have a different number of permutations between projecting karma and completing karma. So let me give you an example of a result, which is a result of a virtuous projecting karma, but non-virtuous completing karma. For example, someone is born as a human being. A human rebirth is the result of virtuous projecting karma. But in that lifetime, if that person let's say, is born with incomplete sensory faculties, if the person experiences a lot of poverty and so forth, those are results of non-virtuous completing karma. Although his or her physical body is a result of virtuous projecting karma. Then, let me give you an example of a result of non-virtuous projecting karma and virtuous completing karma. Take, for example, a dog that belongs to a very wealthy person. Rebirth as a dog is a result of non-virtuous projecting karma. But being the dog of a rich person, the dog might have material enjoyments that greatly surpasses many other human beings. So that is a result of virtuous completing karma. And there are some people out there who think that once something is done, it cannot be changed. That is definitely not the case. Karma, both virtuous and non-virtuous, is subject to change. It can be changed. So, although we may have accumulated a strong non-virtuous karma, but if we engage in confession, it is possible to purify that negative karma, such that we will not have to experience results of that non-virtuous karma. And if we, let's say, if we have accumulated strong virtuous karma, although it can ripen in the form of great happiness, great enjoyments, and so forth, but before it ripens, it can be destroyed by anger. So when we say virtue being destroyed by anger, what is the meaning of destruction here? What is the meaning of destroying the roots of virtue? It means the potential of that karmic seed to bring forth or to issue a positive effect. That potential is either completely destroyed or is reduced. So that is the meaning of the destruction of virtue by anger. So I personally think that these points are very important, especially for a Buddhist. These are things that we need to know.
לדוגמה, אם ביצענו פעולה חיובית שיש לה את הכוח או את העוצמה להביא ללידה במחוז קיום טוב, זאת אומרת פעולה משליכה שהייתה חיובית, עדיין היא יכולה להיהרס אם כעס יעלה ויתפתח ברצף התודעה שלנו. כעס או שנאה יכולים להפחית או לערער, להחליש את הפוטנציאל של פעולות חיוביות שביצענו בעבר. ולכן באופן כללי, באופן תמציתי, למרות שהנושא הזה, רוחב הראייה של הנושא הזה של קרמה הוא עצום, באופן מתומצת אנחנו אומרים שקודם כל קרמה זה פעולות שאנחנו מבצעים בשילוב עם מוטיבציה מסוימת, שהן מביאות לתוצאות מסוימות של סבל או עושר. יש סוגים שונים של קרמה, קרמה שמשליכה או קרמה שמשלימה, והקרמה שאנחנו צוברים היא לא קבועה ולא משתנה, אלא יש אפשרות לשנות את מסלול השלט קרמה חיובית או קרמה שלילית שצברנו בעבר. נעשו.
다 렌데 사기 딘데기 다 다두 디토는 로윤드 페이지 상부지 제 용야 직당 냠바지 용담마용 사데 소소랑기 라발리에 데베 서치 Tita to Chiting, Suchtua, or Le Sambu Sadamada, Sosol Ralev, or that Tendechi Indu, Le Sambu Savaina, Dibu Ranigi, the Yin Yungre, Le Nyamach Savaina, Dibu Rani, Yongo Rani Remoto, Shen Suchi Yomare, or Tendechi Indu, and Rani Yoachire, Tende Indu, Rangti, Rang Machumba. Cheta majestic, Rana Rawa Yudel Suji, Suchi to them over Surgi, or Tinde Surgi, the Lende Sati, Committee Tindichitua, Tindechi Indu, Nambe Cheva Suta Sui Inaya, or Chitsangi, Lende Ichi Chitsangi Yavaina, Susu Kemambe Tanzida Dombala Sobe, Chi Tindegi, Chipanle, Yamcham Drea, Tilla Sushin, Lavia Tilla, Lendele Ichelia, Shutu Yadachi. Tinde Indu, Lanen to which Goyachi, or Tusimachi, or that teaching bare, Tigi, that Peching, that Mondo Duya, Tangili Duya, Niganane, Mondo Duya, Zambe, and it that Shebarudi, Pechir Sarsu. The Inayam, Ku Shotulia, Lende Landor Butolia, Lobjon things up chess, Gongonji Yabina, and Tindi in La Juni Gor. Lobjong Nanje, Tambu Jabo Gunyomo, Niva Juba Leino, Tamadine Dungelos, or Tuschen, Sungudua, Gomuluge Sungiore, Lobeine Sungiore, or Tuscheni, Tuzu Cortilia, Lobjonti, Chebeina, Shine, and Penjegale, Dujegale, Tinjibu, Pangre, Tundres, Tuzugangala, Susi, Jinever, Jineja, Tinde Rodan, Tinde Yoimada, somewhat of it. And Tagishi, the Kenan, you land, shelling you, Tonjun use, what that giddy, and Sebo Hakotuya, what Tindeg Tolia, Tindi Juningi, and the Namshati, Lobjon Chiati, Kechambo. Tubasangi Jum then the Rani Giang, Hajangi Kechambo, Gone, Gindung Zula Kanga, Gomjolia, Tindi Juning, never to Tibu rest, what can answer Dilatene, and Panama Junto Chabu rest, or Dushin Kanashati, or T, the Rumutigi, or Lendeg Namshala, never yag, Tone, Monto Duaya, Tineoya, or Lendeg Namshal, never yen, Koa Jundo, Rimbati Tone, Ninju Taba Duaya, Tineoya, or that Tilatene, Ransom do Masebe, Semjen Shanlea, Koenel Kursugi, Nizu Tuzusam Yindu, Ninja Hawar to Jayoaji, or Ji Chambat Ninja Chaya, Tine on the edge, or Tindu, Tende La Juniti, Ji, Gibuchung Yamela, Pentochambo, Montoduya, Gibu Ding Yamela, Pentochambo, Gongo Chambo, Gibu Chambing Yamela, Gongo Chambo, or those Chene, Tindi and La Juni Namshati, Yachung, but Yachambo, or Tinichimbare.
So if we look at the presentation of karma and its effects, basically it looks like it is an instruction or telling us that, hey, whether your life turns out to be good or bad, it is entirely in your hands. As we have discussed earlier on, non-virtuous action will result in suffering, result in unpleasant effects. Virtuous actions will result in pleasant effect, happiness, isn't it? So it is really in our hands because we do have a choice to choose between creating a virtue on virtue. And it is not dependent on others, so to speak, isn't it? It is our choice. It's in our hands. So the stronger our faith in karma and its effects, the stronger, the greater will be our efforts in, for example, keeping the vows and commitments that we have taken. Right? So So in regards to the section on achieving high status, I think that's about it. Yeah. But let me say something that's by the way. If we want to understand karma and effects in more detail, then we must study the presentation of the 12 things of dependent origination. So when we study and understand the 12 links of dependent origination, we will come to understand some of the things that I've just mentioned earlier on. If you look at the presentation of the 12 links of dependent origination, you come to understand what is projecting karma, and what is completing karma, or what is actualizing karma. You'll come to understand what are the projected effects and what are the actualized effects. You'll come to understand how there are some effects that will be experienced in the next life. There are effects that will only be experienced in the life after the next, and so forth. Even our kind Guru Shakyamuni Buddha himself emphasized how important it is to understand the 12 links of dependent origination. The Buddha advised that in the main gateway of every temple, there should be an image or drawing of the circle of life and death, which depicts the 12 links of dependent origination. So if you understand the 12 links of dependent origination well, you come to understand how one can achieve high status. And on the basis of renunciation, you can come to understand how we circle in cyclic existence and how we can get out of cyclic existence. And if we throw compassion into the picture by thinking of the suffering of others, using the 12 links of dependent origination, we will be able to generate compassion for others. So the presentation of the 12 links of dependent origination is very extensive and has many applications. Yeah, an understanding of the 12 links of dependent origination will be helpful for the person of small capacity. It will be helpful for a person of medium capacity, and it will be helpful for a person of great capacity.
זה ישפיע על לידה הבאה, שתהיה לידה טובה יותר, או מאפיינים מסוימים בלידות הבאות שלנו שיהיו מאפיינים טובים. אז מעבר לזה, גם מי שמבין בצורה מעמיקה ומספקת את תריסר החוליות שההתהוות בתלות, גם בתלות זה יכול לפתח אהבה וחמלה, אהבה לזולת, דאגה לזולת, שמאוד מיוחדים ומעמיקים, מאוד חזקים. ולכן הנושא הזה של תריסר החוליות של ההתהוות בתלות הוא נושא שהוא חשוב ודרוש לשלבי הדרך המדורגת להערה של אלה בעלי היכולות הפחותות. והוא גם כמובן נושא חשוב ונושא שנדרש לשלבי הדרך המדורגת להערה של אלה בעלי היכולות הבינוניות, וגם אם אנחנו נתרגל את שלבי הדרך המדורגת להערה של אלה בעלי היכולות הכבירות, הנושא הזה של תריסר החוליות של ההתהוות בתלות הוא עדיין נושא חשוב ונושא קריטי. לעשות.
다 두정 몬돌 두줄에 잠베 렌데글랑도 다 두조 다 리우티 조바체 다 니리 두주고 토네 니리 두주고 토들이야 개와 풍수 초벌제 사지 디베 지기어만 대치고 직송금도 왔어 개와 풍수 초벌제 송아지도 왔어 될이야 딱 무소소 타는 너희 칙디기 에 장주선배 냠는데 Musumbachi Mare se ki Shutua Yamare, the Totemba Amy Mishi, Rete, called Dea Yotavachire. Carresna, Rande Ijet and Debe Gone, G. Lungaki, Nieju, Tomiate, Punsun Sobamare. Carresna, Rande Ijik Loisimachre. Susu Kevin Chetre. Oda, Shen all Shani, Lungaki Nieju Dombajina, T. When I turn Hassan Namdaki, the Nieju Dombachire. But in the Inza, Tadedilla, Gawa Punsun Soberche, Suya Tigi. Rando ije da mande begi shin gyutsen zo chebe gone da ji megi chubung chudung chombe o da ji so ge nyamleng chombe o dige di chegugres cheje ji sungdu wa o dige ji rebe na yase chamju simbe nyamle chamba da ningje zawri ge chamju ge samdam rebe yase ge chobala lapsu ge mbade tene tembare shuna ji re ina re tuya ji ye imre.
אז ככה סיימנו לעסוק בבית הזה, או להסביר את משמעות הבית הזה בהקשר של הגשמה של לידה במחוז קיום גבוה, לידה טובה בתור בן אדם או ישויות שמימיות, וקשרנו את זה גם עם קרמה, פעולות שאנחנו מבצעים והתוצאות שמביאות עליהן, ומה שאנחנו צריכים לעשות, זה אומר מה שאנחנו צריכים לקחת על עצמנו ומה שאנחנו צריכים להיפטר ממנו, ביחס.
Hello, yes. Next, we'll talk about the way to achieve definite goodness. So if you look at the verse, which is the subject matter of the teachings today, the Buddha did not stop at the first line. The second line says, engage in perfect virtue or wholesome or perfect actions. Isn't it? So, although the verse, this verse is sourced in the Praktimoksha Sutra, but we cannot say that therefore we cannot say that therefore we cannot that we should not interpret this verse to be we cannot we cannot say that this verse does not teach, does not show the method of for achieving omniscience or full enlightenment. Of course, it is another question if it's another question to say that whether this verse is mainly teaching about omniscience or not. That we can say, right? So anyway, if we engage in the practice of ethical discipline, motivated by our own self-interest, although it is virtue, it is not perfect virtue. But if we refrain from harming others based on a genuine concern for the welfare of others, based on the welfare or the happiness of other sentient beings, then such a practice of abandoning the 10 non-virtues motivated by this thought of benefiting others becomes an example of perfect virtue. So if we interpret or if we, let's say, read perfect virtue as something that is connected with the bodhicitta motivation, then of course then we can talk about the practice of the bodhisattva deeds. Yeah? The practice of the bodhisattva deeds are done with the bodhicitta motivation, which itself is rooted in love and compassion.
Lasso.
And Gawa Punsun Sober Jess Sati, and Punsun Sober Indama in Sati, Tone, and the Jasik Jobal Sober to the Tenant Decho race, Chanjusim Benyam Negative, Tenant Decho Choda, Carreras Chevina, and Nyeran namgi, Nindu dan Rangen namgi, Rangdun ije zol shane, ta Rangdun du Shiva to gudu sala, ta Sosorani tarwa, Sosor tarwa, o Sosorani Ninson le tarwa, Kowa le tarwa, o Tindrechigi, Miu le shane, Drube Nyamlengi tone, tanda ji, ta Cholam, Jolam, Tonglam, Gomlam, Melolam, Lam Tigeti, Rinpoche, Yaji, Chine, Tar Dajum Dribuji Toba Inaya, Nindu Dajum Dribu, Range Dajum Dribu, that Nindu Lamla Tene, Nindu Korangi, that Melolam Toba Imbare, Range Lam Tene, Range Melolam Toba Imbare. Oh, Dele Havachi Nindu Lam, Yanjo Mabere, Range Lam, Yanjo Mabere, that Nyarangi, the Tobja Tatuti, Tobachi Imbare. Rete Tenda Tigi, and G. Lamji Malava Tigi, and Panjamalu Pangaduwe, Tobjamalu Toguduwe, or Tundes Cheje, Shimju Cheindu, Panja Nyomu Dubazam Pangarete, Sheje Duba Pantu. Oh, Karisana, Di Gulaya, Rangdun to Shiwakamba Tobrandebe, Lo Chigi, Lo Chigi, that Karsori, Kenchiki, Sinde Yaba Inza, or Chanju Sentimendu, or Timeba Inza, Taking Yamland Medo, or Tindu, Panja Nitsova, Yunju Zambamba, Tobja Nitsova, Dajoma Tabaramato, Tony Yonsuzobe, Sanji Yukoma, Togumendo, Dinde Indu, Pusun Soba Chagmendo. Oh, that two generation Gabaina, Gava Pusun Soba Chess Yabati, or Chambata Ninja Zauri Tube, Dabe Shenjibe, Chanju Sengi, Nyamlenti, Google Sadi, that Jetende Yotabachi. Kandar Nili Tarazamdi, Dangi Meva, Tamji Kemba Komachi, Top Gogi Yabaina, Dimni Maluba Pang, Sony Maluba Zo, Tandadi, Bengo Papa Ludugi, Sungudwa, Gawadi, Gyu, Sonam Ishi, Tozoshi, Sonam Ishi, Lechun, Tambakuni Tobra shows. Manzu Sonam the Toji Sagi Yore, Ishi Toji Sagi Yore, Lam Tabi Yamlenji Chigi Yore, Sheriff Yamlenji Chigi Yore, Tabi Yamne, Chambata Ninja, Zawala Shabe, Chanju Sing Yamne, Sheriff Yamne, Tony Dobe Yamne, Tony Yamne, what a Tindechigi, Tindechig check where he gives them Karisana, and Sonam the Chota, Ishi Chot, Tindechigi, Yamne Chilla, Dene, and Rangi Julia, and Lam Tabi Yamlengi, Rimbachita, and Samuel Tombaniki, Sheriff Yamlengi, Rimbati, Julike Uncres, Lam Tapshinis. Tindechigi, any Yamlen Telatene, Dributelaya, and Sanje to compound sang, Sanje to compound there, and Chugu Tambatan, Suku Tambas, Manzutuni Tobe Yamlen tea, Topji, Sheriff Yamlen tea, Topji, Monbalaya, Topje Dribu Sanjigi, Ishi Chujuku, on the Chiaji, and Dutumo my Waters. Oh, that Jinso Tabji Cha, Chanju Samna Sobe, or Samba Samjeta, Jinso Tabji Chagi, Yamlen to get the Latane, and Monbalaya, Yave, Sukuku Dragi, and never shaggy yours, Dutumo my Chituguores, the name Sonam Ishi, Sozoshi, Sonam Ishi, Le Chunwe, Tambakuni Tower shows, Tambakunis, Tambakuni, Chugutambatan, Sukutamba, or Tusjen, Sunguduas, or the name Tandetelea, Yava Puson Tower Jesheve, Chanju Sing, the Nyamlang Rimbatiki, Rang 7 Yonson Dulce at the and Tunitobe Nyamlang song, or the Lam Tapsheniga, we have a chitty in Tinandaria, 17 years.
בשורה השנייה של הבית הזה, עבודה אומר, תפחו מעשי חסד מושלמים. אז נשאל את עצמנו, מה המשמעות של מעשי חסד מושלמים? מה הם מעשי חסד מושלמים? מה קובע את מעשי החסד כמושלמים? אם מעשי החסד שלנו, הפעולות החיוביות שלנו, הן תלויות בששת השלמויות, נדיבות, מוסריות וכולי, הפעולות האלה הופכות להיות פעולות מושלמות, מעשי חסד מושלמים. שהרי אם נסתכל על הסוגים השונים של המתרגלים הבודהיסטים, יש סוגים שונים, יש סוג מתרגל אחד נקרא באנגלית hearer או השומעים, או בסנסקריט שראבקס, סוג מתרגל שני נקרא solitude realizer באנגלית, או בעברית מתרגלים או בודהת בכוחות עצמם, פלטייק הבודהז, והתרגול של שני המתרגלים האלה הוא טעון או טבוע ברצון להגשים את תועלת העצמי. זה אומר שהתרגול שלהם מונע מרצון להגשים את הרווחה האישית או את התועלת העצמית עבורם בלבד, ובאמצעות תרגול הדרמה הם מגיעים למצב השחרור, שחרור של השומעים, של שראבקס, ושחרור של פרטייק הבודה, של בודה בכוחות עצמם. זה אומר שהמטרה שלהם בעצם הוא להגשים את מצב השחרור עבורם בלבד. וכדי להגשים את מצב השחרור, הם עוברים דרך תרגול של חמש הדרכים, דרך הצבירה, דרך ההכנה, דרך הראייה, דרך המדיטציה, והדרך החמישית שהיא לא דורשת אימון נוסף. באנגלית קוראים לזה the path of normal learning, אבל המילה learning בטיבטית גם משמעותה היא להתאמן. זה אומר שאלה שהגיעו לדרך החמישית, הדרך שלא דורשת אימון נוסף, כמו שהמונח הזה אומר, הם לא צריכים יותר להתאמן מעבר לזה כדי להגשים את מה שהם התכוונו אליו, את המטרה שלהם, שהיא מצב השחרור. אז כששני סוגי המתרגלים האלה, שוב אנחנו עוסקים במתרגלים שהם לא בודיסטאטווה, אלא מתרגלים שהם שומעים, ומתרגלים שהם בודות בכוחות עצמם, שני המתרגלים האלה, למרות שהם מגשימים בסופו של דבר, מגיעים לדרך שלא דורשת אימון נוסף, למרות שהם הגשימו את מטרתם, מצב השחרור, עדיין הם לא הכחידו לגמרי, without exception, ללא שום שאריות, הם לא הכחידו, הם לא הפסיקו לגמרי ללא שום שאריות את כל הדברים שהם היו יכולים להסיר, והם עדיין לא טיפחו או השיגו את כל התכונות, את כל המעלות שהם היו יכולים לטפח. מה שהם עושים כדי להגשים את מצב החירות הוא להכחיד, להפסיק סוג אחד של מערפלים שנקראים המערפלים העוכרים, אבל הם לא מפסיקים, לא מכחידים את מערפלי הידע, באנגלית cognitive obscurations. זה אומר בעצם שמה שהם הכחידו ומה שהם השיגו, מה שהם הגשימו, הוא בעצם חלקי. ההסרות או הדברים, החסרונות שהם נפטרו מהם הם חלקיים, והמעלות שהם טיפחו הם גם מעלות חלקיות. ואם נשאל את עצמנו למה הם הגשימו מצב שהוא חלקי. הם הגשימו מצב שהוא חלקי כי בעצם המוטיבציה הכוונה שגרמה להם לתרגל בדרך הזאת הייתה משוללת תודעת הערה, היא לא הייתה משולבת עם בודיצ'יטה. ולכן, שוב כשאנחנו חוזרים לשורה הזאת, תפחו מעשי חסד מושלמים, שהיא השורה השנייה בבית, אז לטפח מעשי חסד מושלמים, זה אומר לטפח אותם ביחד עם אהבה, דאגה לזולת, חמלה ובודיצ'יטה או תודעת הערה. בעצם גם אם אנחנו היינו משיגים או מגשימים את מצב החירות, זה עדיין לא מספיק, כי מה שהיינו יכולים להגשים או מה שהיינו יכולים לעשות, אנחנו בעצם מגשימים אותו רק בצורה חלקית. בדיוק כמו או בהקשר לזה אפשר גם להתבונן בבית שנגרג'ונה למד באחד מהכתבים שלו. הוא אמר בבית של ההקדשה, באמצעות מעשי החסד האלה, לו אשלים את שני המצבורים, זה אומר מצבור פוטנציאל הזכות ומצבור החוכמה, ובתלות בשני המצבורים האלה, לו אגשים את שני גופי הבודה, לו אשיג את שני גופי הבודה. זה אומר שמה שנגרג'ונה התכוון עליו, כשחושבים על משמעות הבית הזה, אז נגרג'ונה אומר, באמצעות מעשה החסד שלנו, לו נצליח להשלים, להביא לשלמות את שני המצבורים. שני המצבורים הם קודם כל מצבור פוטנציאל הזכות, זה הראשון, והמצבור השני הוא מצבור של חוכמה. כשאנחנו מתרגלים היבטים מסוימים של הדרך, לדוגמה תרגול הבודיצ'יטה, אהבה, דאגה לזולת, חמלה, אנחנו מתרגלים את הצד של הדרך שנקרא הצד של השיטה, והתרגולים האלה הם תורמים למצבור פוטנציאל הזכות. כשאנחנו מטפחים את החוכמה שמבינה את הריקות, מבינה בצורה נכוחה את הריקות, אנחנו תורמים למצבור החוכמה הנשגבת. אז בעצם בשילוב של שני המצבורים האלה, מצבור פוטנציאל הזכות ומצבור החוכמה, אנחנו רוצים לתרגל את הדרכים של השיטה והדרכים של החוכמה, כדי שבסופו של דבר בשילוב של החוכמה והשיטה אנחנו נגשים בעצמנו את מצב הבודה. וכשנגשים את מצב הבודה אנחנו בעצם נשיג את שני גופי הבודה, שני גופי הבודה.
Hello, testing. Can you hear me? Okay. Testing. Can you hear me? Okay. I don't know where to start now. Testing, can you hear me? So Rinpoche was talking about how we can read the word perfect virtue, and definitely we can relate this to the Bodhisattva deeds. Why is this the case? So if you think of the hearers and solitary realizers, they are focused only on achieving their own freedom from the bad migrations. They are focused on only achieving their own individual liberation from cyclic existence. And whether it is the hearers or the solitary realizers path, you know, there are the 5 paths, the paths of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and then they have their own respective path of no more learning. So a hearer will achieve the hearer's enlightenment. The solitary realizers will achieve the solitary realizers' enlightenment. So they become full destroyers. However, have the hearer and solitary realizers arhats abandoned everything that can be abandoned? Have they achieved everything that can be achieved? No, because the I think, yeah, that's that we will continue it on.
Teaching so iginabi semge chita job chingu yamnti detan drava dus cheje tangi shuba chire nge uzu jabe surchire ta di kechi jung khandi chire slaba ina namyu kadam khome sungre na ya chue tiba chimbe chue yimbe mepen kansa tiba chimbe chedu chubuji gus odni chi sungu yare ta ngaran chogi mangcha chigi ji ta phugyu nandengi che lobjong che nyamne chi nyambu chi jir number sign give che di nane kya ji tiba chimbe che di nane kya sanga ge che o tinde chi ta nyamne chi ne mang cha chi dos tu che ne ro denge ji re tinde indu page nyamsu lenje che di ji shera ni bolo so do zone do chogi tiba chimbe che chi cha ge yore 다 상하기 냠내 되게디 nga chogi tibachim chu chi chagi yore dinde chi indu kaan nyamsu lenje chu di tibachim chu hajang sabo o dinde chi yinde ba kanshi chigla 대다른 nyamsu lengen tigi 대다부티 다 chi 공기 연나래 능기 연나래 갑 뒤둘려야 꾸롱이 개발 3년 개발 간디지 고래스나 단대 슈마타베 누만인데기 sem choma mai ba chi yonane pere hangsayare jisu yirake nere tadara mena ya susu lu juje kulung ke ba tendechida rebe tone ane nyamne chekures kararesna di tiba chimbi jugo semges tiba chimbi chegi nyamnela brotupta matu sengende samba semge di sinda masinla ra legi yotabachi di indu di kechu shoji imbate 디 개첨부지 인도 다 dindeegi shende tonyeng dumba sang kandechire changju shende tonyeng dumbe gyuches changju tonyeng dumbe troches di kandechire o ta tinyengi gi to samno tinyengi gi jesundene ane joba sangye kompa tomde singde kandechire ta tuzo 신의 종달 내바전도 제거하다 도낭 내바전도 제거하다 개첨부 차도 왔어.
So I was talking about the bodhicitta motivation. So there's a saying of the former masters. It is not sufficient for the Dharma to be Mahayana. The practitioner must be a Mahayanist. So many of us we are Buddhists. And not only that, we are followers or practitioners of the Mahayana, and there's some of us who are even followers or practitioners of the Vajrayana tradition. So the practitioners of the Sutra Mahayana consider, for example, the Heart of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra is very important, and they study and practice it. And of course, followers of the Vajrayana tradition have different tantric practices. So whether it is the Heart of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra or whether it is the a particular Buddhist tantra, they are all profound practices. But in order for these practices to become a Mahayana practice, those practices have to be done conjoined with the mind of enlightenment, the bodhicitta motivation. Of course, it is ideal if we engage in these practices with an uncontrived bodhicitta motivation. But even if we are not able to generate an uncontrived bodhicitta, we should put effort into cultivating or generating this motivation in our hearts. Yeah. So bodhicitta is that which determines whether a particular practice becomes a Mahayana practice or not, and therefore it determines whether a practice will be a cause of enlightenment or not. Having said that, then what exactly is this bodhicitta? So in technical terms, we say bodhicitta is a main mind, a knower that possesses two aspirations. An aspiration that seeks the elevation, that seeks to free all the sentient beings from their suffering, and an aspiration to achieve omniscience. So an aspiration to free all sentient beings from suffering is said to be the cause, and an aspiration to achieve omniscience is the assisting or complementary factors. So with the coming together of these two aspirations, then the mind of bodhicitta comes into being. Yeah? So even bodhicitta, even when we talk about bodhicitta motivation alone, there's so much to talk about, there's so much to know. Yeah. So so let me continue because there were some technical difficulties earlier on, yeah, so I couldn't translate what Rinpoche said earlier on. So Rinpoche was trying to explain how the word perfect virtue, okay, there's no time again. Okay. Oh, please. Oh.
Semjen tamjela mi be ene ji ta zawachile gu yore o tinde ji semjen tamje dungi gyude jabal trende lo chile gu yore tinde indu telia chajini kangnabe dungi ngwe soma o dadala mi ne en labar de zere zawa o tinde ji lo ni dugwa chi duas shinde tinde dumbe gyuche sadel lo tini dugwa chi duas tinde indu kangnabe dungi ngwe sum sagi dungi tela tanda ngarandu sachi ki chowa dungi ki dungi es te tsamla ya ene ngwe simba chikoki dungi ngwe simba kapten dil dhugu miduwas ta gyuwe dungi esine sachi ki chowa dewala ya chi tembo me dewa chi ti ngwe simba tsamgi ya ene kamdi ditengi dungi ngwe simba la dhugu miduwas kararisina sachi ki chowa dewala ya yi junghe nangba mayimbe ane chik chiro transform chik samden yungushi dasu tuzolo soba yuli kengi tuzo nala yungutu was ta talen kapsu babadi ane kangir nabe dungen ngoyo sung singende chisi le da nyomombe shawangi nar chinche tela tendu dewa yeme dewa sayajigi o ti ane dungengi natsu ti ane duje dungengi chingsu ti ane ngoyo singwayaji chagdu was o 강근나베 동행을 송았어. 근데 인도 누제 동행이 나추스 누제 동행이 친구 생애들라 아니 신의 띵서버 시우지 차제 어떻게 띵리 일나 주니 도당 뒤도네 누제 동행이 친구 섬야래 아니 지용기 단데 디숨도와 장벌랑 좀바 친구 송래 남존남 숨나 슈다 초시 윤기케 너가 레기 친구 담배다 당신 자기 차에 무스주 말이 문배 막체 꾸네데 메메스벌 깨시 깨와로 동해순지 균체 매반나 내가 딘들 큐베 랑이기 있으면 소소랑 성담바이나 아니 지 코알이 이중 유주투야 두비아기 주세르 야 조투야 다디 semjen shen dungne te na so ya samno khoba ina ane 닝제 첨부 타야기 니 줄이야 로투야 강gen나베 dungne 순당 토리 로투야 다 강달 게가 나치 딘데기 지두기 초시고 디조스 유메발이 중앙 말스 가르스나 레라데니 중바레스 레드 수사바레 뇽몽도 꾸네라네 사바레스 딘데 뇽바티 차솔 차당라 소바 투지 지 딘데기 니주 용야디 조 미셰 몽바 마리베 차바치레스 딘데기 미시기 몽바 다도 즈베 당진데야 자와디 추기 당진을 투바치레스 추기 당진이 시체네 강사가 당진께 강사가 당진이 왕 친줄로 도다 친줄로 도 추미 이제 도다 발레 에네 레상에 나조 직사 레상에 나조라 때네 에네 지 균의 조규균의 매대베 코베네리아 코르데야 도스치네 지 드부지 조기야 뉴사바지기 난 뉴사바지 두고 체제 엔균 수준천다 라마메바 이사지 딘지스렌데 도와스
So so coming back to the bodhicitta motivation, so the mind of bodhicitta, the spirit of enlightenment, is a main mind that possesses two aspirations: an aspiration that seeks to fulfill the welfare of others, and an aspiration to full enlightenment. So the aspiration that seeks to fulfill the welfare or the happiness of sentient beings is the cause of bodhicitta. Right? In order to generate this aspiration that seeks to fulfill the welfare of all sentient beings, we must generate two separate attitudes, two different other minds. What are these two? First, a recognition and understanding of suffering, and love and compassion for others. We need these two separate attitudes before we can develop an aspiration that seeks to fulfill the welfare of sentient beings. So let's talk about the first, recognizing suffering. So in this context, recognizing suffering does not refer to understanding the suffering of pain. Neither does it refer to an understanding of the suffering of change, which refers to our contaminated, pleasant feelings. Even non-Buddhists can understand what is suffering of pain and seek to renounce it. Even non-Buddhists can understand what is suffering of change, and they seek to renounce the suffering of change. Here, in this context, in the Buddhist context in particular, the suffering that it is to be recognized is the suffering of conditionality, or the suffering of conditioned existence. The point is that as long as we are under the control of karma and afflictions, as long as we are tormented by karma and afflictions, then this is the real suffering. So even with regards to the suffering of conditionality, we need to understand how we are tormented by it and how we are bound by it. So in the three principal aspects of the path by Rinpoche, he said, all ordinary beings are carried by the continuum of the four powerful currents, are tied with the tight bonds of karma, difficult to oppose, have entered into the iron cage of self-grasping, are completely beclouded with the thick darkness of ignorance, are born into cyclic existence limitlessly, and in their birth are tortured ceaselessly by the three sufferings. Thinking of the conditions of mothers who have come to such a state. So Rinpoche said this. So if we change, if we substitute the word mothers with I, thinking thus of the condition of how I have come to such a state, then we'll be able to generate renunciation. So the four powerful currents that Rinpoche talks about here refers to the four results of birth, aging, sickness, and death. Birth, aging, sickness, and death do not arise from without any causes and conditions. They are caused. They arise from karma. What motivates the creation and the accumulation of karma? The afflictions. And afflictions themselves have their root in the self-grasping ignorance, and in particular, an apprehension of a self or person. But the basis of an apprehension of a self or person is an apprehension of a self or phenomena. The apprehension of the self or phenomena is the basis, which then makes the apprehension of a self or person possible. And once we have this self-grasping ignorance, afflictions will arise. And whenever afflictions arise, we accumulate new karma, and we continue to, and we will then continue to experience the effects of those karma. Birth. And when there's birth, then there's aging, the sickness, and death, and so forth. So if you think about this, suffering is kind of like endless. Even while we are going through one particular unpleasant experience, or while in one particular rebirth, and before even before that experience has come to an end, or before the particular rebirth has come to an end, we are also in the process of accumulating new causes, new karma for future suffering. In that sense, it is endless, isn't it?
הוא בערות שאוחזת בעצמי, במה שנקרא באנגלית self-grasping ignorance. אז בעצם בתלות בערות שאוחזת בעצמי, עולה ומתפתחת ברצף התודעה שלנו שימת לב שהיא לא נכונה למושאים מסוימים. ובגלל שימת הלב שהיא לא נכונה, שמתבססת על הבערות, אנחנו ברצף התודעה שלנו מתפתחים כעס והשתוקקות וכולי, והם גורמים לנו לבצע פעולות, או קרמה. והפעולות האלה הן גורמות לנו שוב ושוב ושוב להיוולד במעגלי הקיום בסמסרה. ובתהליך הסמסרי הזה, כשאנחנו מבינים אותו תוך כדי הבנה של, כמו שרימפוצ'ה אמר, ההבנה של התהליך של תריסר החוליות של ההתהוות בתלות, אנחנו מבינים איך אנחנו ממשיכים ליצור פעולות ששומרות אותנו בתהליך הסמסרי, תוך כדי חוויה של תוצאות שנחוות בתור התהליך הסמסרי. אנחנו חווים ויוצרים בו זמנית. 나솔라.
단대에 룽대 자야티기 람줄 룽자야티기 가르펜도 여 슈비나 미타튼두이 개발께자요 말에 드로에 개발 미도와 드네 조와 젠다 조와 멤버 개발 미도와 셴 젠다 셴 멤버 개발 미도와 우추위 개발 미도와 랑수이 개발 미도와 겐셴 개발 미도와 용수 저거 찔이야 지 코베랑 신기 내단디 니지 캡디요 디도체 섬다나 지 주체 세부요 봐 캡쳐부요 봐 어떤데 번에 다 지시 레다 용배 샤왕 찡칭체들라 에네 땐도 대화 매대봐 어떤데 지기 내단데 지 레샤 사메데 엔 시기 딸이 껴인제 엔 수수 종달치기나 지 롤리야 구조대래 땐데 캐요 되지 내 정도 마세베 지난주 배치 킹그레 망부센요래 야와신도 야야송고요래 뱅고바바 루두비 자와 셰르나 타르바생인데 가르래 코와생인데 가르래 타르바생인데 룽바 가와지를 둬야래 근데 말다스 지시 단대가라츠 남이 셔르 두지기 풍고디 레닝 샤운 찡치제들 코와레스 지시 나라즈 셔르 두지기 풍고디 나리아 수수기로 또베인데 지게네 다 베드문에 타네기 레다 뇨모데 세소나 디닝가데 롱보신다 로모고 타바스기 땡드가라네 토바치레스 레다 뇨모 세베 타르스 레다 뇨모 아나 간데스 중벌에서도 수미지가 남도래 중벌에서 레다 뇨모 남도레스 아나 수미지가 남도데 간데스 중벌에서나 딘지기 트라발레 중벌에서 대다 트레레스 아나 딘지기 트라바티 다 너야지 여르베스 가야지 여르베스나 코 잡텐사마 요마르 로 트바레 로 친질로레 코 에니 양다바 니루통 셰럽지기 빵투야지 여르스 다다 트레바니 동바 니긴 가버디우스 동바 니두 가버디우스 니 두스나 고덴 자야 니기 가버디우스나 랑덴 자야 두스레 친 까는 것도와 두스 칠도서 수수 양양 지 전소 단계 아니 지 고발의 초당 이른바 에너지 타바 토비아 탐지 겸 고마 톱두당 토리아 어떤지 상당입니다. 그러면 주제스무스
The Kanksha, here I'm just going to put the three principal aspects of the path in the screen in front of us for those of you who haven't got the text in front of you. So these are the two verses that Rinpoche quoted. As Rinpoche אומר שהוא שואל,
Rinpoche has quoted these verses from the three principal aspects of the path. So what's the benefit in memorizing and thinking, reflecting on these verses? You see, there's no difference between the humans and animals in terms of being in cyclic existence, isn't it? There's no difference between the rich and the poor. There's no difference between those who are educated or not educated. There's no difference between the old and the young. The conditioned existence, the state of cyclic existence, samsara, applies to all of us, isn't it? So if we think about these two verses from the three principles of the path, then how this whole situation of us being in samsara becomes clearer. So the point is this: as long as we are bound by karma and afflictions, there can never be any real happiness. So that's the point. So we talk about liberation from cyclic existence. What exactly is liberation? Liberation is not about going to a special place. What is cyclic existence? Cyclic existence is not really a place. As long as we have the contaminated, appropriated physical and mental aggregates due to karma and afflictions, then that is the real cyclic existence, the real samsara. Come the day when we abandon karma and afflictions. If the karma and afflictions in our mental continuum ceases to exist, then there and then, it doesn't matter where you are, you have achieved liberation. So Nagarjuna, in his fundamental wisdom, said, when karma and affliction cease, there is liberation. Karma and afflictions arise from false conceptions. Yes, afflictions motivate the accumulation of karma. And due to karma, we take on the contaminated physical and mental aggregates. But what is it that drives the accumulation of karma? It is false conception or incorrect mental extension. And then why is it that we have false conceptions? False conceptions arise from elaborations or elaboration of true existence. False conceptions arise from the grasping at inherent existence. Fortunately, the elaborations of true existence, the self-grasping ignorance, can be removed, can be overcome, because in the first place, it is an erroneous conception. It doesn't have any valid support, and it can be removed by cultivating its antidote, which is wisdom. And such elaborations of true existence are seized by emptiness. So I repeat this verse again. When karma and affliction cease, there is liberation. Karma and afflictions arise from false conceptions. These arise from elaborations. Elaborations are seized by emptiness. So if we translate the last line as elaborations are seized by emptiness, we are approaching in this more from the perspective of the true path. If we say elaborations are seized in emptiness, then we are approaching it more from the perspective of true cessation. Yes. I think it's a time for a break.
Hello. Can we please take a break, short break?
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
So we take until I think it's 25 minutes until the short. It was supposed to be 30 minutes, but we take a shorter break, 25 minutes. And the English channel listeners, you can stay. You're welcome to stay and listen to the interpretation of Venerable Guillaume for the 5 minutes that were missing during this session. So we'll see you in 25 minutes.
Okay. So I'll just I'll translate the section that I missed out due to technical difficulties. So Rinpoche said that the source of this verse is from the Pratimoksha Sutra, isn't it right? So, and if that's the case, then there might arise a doubt, right? Thinking that then how can you then interpret the second line of this verse to mean the definite goodness of full enlightenment and the methods for achieving full enlightenment, since the source is a Hinayana scripture. So that was the point that Michelle was trying to explain, isn't it? So the interpretation hinges on the word perfect in the second line. So engage in perfect or wholesome actions or perfect virtue, isn't it? Right? So definitely we can relate perfect virtue to the Bodhisattva deeds. So the hearers and solitary realizers, their main focus is on achieving freedom from the bad migrations, and in particular, freedom from cyclic existence for their own purpose, isn't it? And to achieve their own liberation, they have to enter the respective paths, either the hearer's paths or the solitary realizer's paths. And both consist of 5 paths: the paths of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and then the paths of no more learning. So when the hearers achieve their own path of no more learning, they become a hearer's arhat. When the solitary realizers achieve their own path of no more learning, they become solitary realizers arhat. But have these arhats, the hearers arhats and the solitary realizers arhats, have they abandoned everything that can be abandoned? And have they achieved every possible good quality that can be achieved? The answer is no. Of the 2 obscurations, the afflictive obscurations and the knowledge obscurations, the hearers and solitary arhats have only abandoned the afflictive obscurations. They have not abandoned the knowledge obscurations. And because their motivation for achieving liberation is only self-interest, they've only focused on their own happiness. As such, they do not yet have the mind of enlightenment or bodhicitta. And as such, because of the lack of the bodhicitta motivation, they do not have a practice of method and wisdom, which leads to the accumulations of merit and wisdom. And as such, they have not achieved all the qualities, good qualities that can be achieved. So therefore, for any individual, in order to abandon all that can be abandoned, all the faults and mistakes that can be abandoned, and in order to achieve every single possibility that, every single possible good quality that can be achieved, one needs to enter the Mahayana path. We need to practice the Mahayana. So Nagarjuna, I think in his 60 stanzas of reasoning, he said that through the practice of method and wisdom, one achieves the collection of method and wisdom, which then gives rise to the two holy bodies, the form and the truth body, isn't it? So through the accumulation of method, one will achieve the form body, and through the accumulation of wisdom, one will achieve the truth body. Through the accumulation of merit, one achieves form body. Through the accumulation of wisdom, one achieves the truth body. And in order to accumulate the collection of merit, we need to practice in the method aspect of the path, which is basically the bodhisattva deeds that are performed, motivated by the mind of enlightenment or bodhicitta. And such a practice of method then leads to the accumulation of merit, which will then result in the attainment of the form body. Through the practice of the wisdom aspect of the path, which is primarily generating and cultivating the wisdom realizing emptiness, then one accumulates the collection of wisdom, which then will then result in the attainment of the wisdom truth body. Okay, so we need to engage in a path that brings together the practice of method and wisdom. So, and the practice of method is indicated by the second line in the verse: engage in perfect actions of perfect virtue. The practice of the wisdom is indicated by the third line in this verse: subdue your mind thoroughly. Okay, that's about it. See you at 4 o'clock.